Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonix Technologies. In this lecture I'm going to be going over how to measure and a little trick on how to measure angles, as well as this is going to be kind of a quick paced lecture and it's going to be a long video, but we're going into a lot, and after this we're going to be going into shapes. So as you can see, I've already drawn out a few things on here. Now I have smart guides on, like you should pretty much all the time. Also snap to point, and none of my guides are hidden or locked. That'll come in later. For right now we're going to go into measuring two squares, two rectangles, right across from each other. Now, Illustrator has a measure tool. Don't use it because it doesn't snap into anything. Instead use the line tool and make sure you have your info panel open over here. The info panel is available, like all the other panels, in window up here. So what your info panel looks like, a little circle with an eye in it when it's an icon. So just expand that. I like to drag mine out. Anyway, so we'll add this actually to a new column here for workspaces. So as you can see, I've highlighted, or I've moved my mouse over the anchor, and I have the line tool selected in the info panel up. I'm going to drag over here, and as you can see, it's the other anchor on the other side. It's telling me on the info panel the width and height on the right side of it, and the position on the left side. Don't worry about the position too much. That just tells you where the position of the beginning of this line segment is, usually the upper left hand part of the shape, or the beginning of the line segment, relative to the upper left corner of the document, which is the origin. So anyway, it's telling me it's 2.1319 inches. And if I want to measure down to here, it's a little bit different. Don't look at your info panel, but look at the little gray box next to your cursor as you're still holding it in. The reason why the info panel won't tell you is because it's telling you the width of this line and the height, as if there was a box right here. You know, these were the corners of the box. It's telling you the width and height. If you want to get a more precise measurement of the angle, you can use your pen tool. The same rules still apply, basically. In this case, I'm going to be drawing an angle out that matches this one. So I'm going to start here. You go down to where I have an intersect. Right now it's telling me anchor. I know that's the corner, so that's fine. And don't click anything yet, but just let it snap to right there on the path. And if you look over, it says 31.256. You would need to subtract this from 90 because your starting angle, according to Illustrator, is going straight up and down, and it's 90 degrees. Just like when you were using a line segment. So don't click it, because when you click it, it doesn't remember the angle, as you can see. If I go back to this shape and highlight it, all it has is width and height. So like I said, it doesn't really have the greatest tools for measuring angle, but that's how you do it. And that's how you do it if you want to get the exact measurement too. Now as far as guides and what guides are, I'm going to drag some guides out, as you've seen me do before with the ruler. That's one way of doing it. And guides snap to things like anything else. Guides are also, in a way, objects. You treat them like objects when it comes down to the layers panel. We'll get into more on layers later, but I'm going to make my own guides layer. Come up here and call it G, real short. And now that I'm in this layer, I'm going to drag my existing guide into there. Illustrator has a show and hide guides option, but honestly it's better to keep them in their own layer, I like to think, and it depends on the project, of course. Alright, the other thing you can do with guides is make a shape in the guides. It's Control 5 or Command 5, and it's called Make Guides. As you can see, the other options here, I'll go into real quick. Clear Guides, which gets rid of all your guides. Hide Guides, which is kind of handy, but you have to go back and forth. But as you can see, it's an easy shortcut. And Lock Guides, which is pretty helpful, but with putting them all in one layer, you can lock that layer easily. You don't always have to go into your menu or memorize these shortcuts. So I'm going to go to Make Guides. It's the second main way of making guides. As you can see, it turned both of these shapes I made into guides. So, unlike regular shapes in Illustrator, I can't give these fill or anything. They're only guides, and they only have those characteristics that we can use in these guides. So guides are useful because of what they do, because they allow you to use smart guides on them, and they allow you to use them to line up other things with. But they don't behave as shapes, they don't print. The only way they do behave as shapes is as objects, where you can move them around in the layers panel, you can lock them. That's just for convenience, so they're really helpful. Also, if I take the ellipse tool, the circle, and I draw a circle, and I want to make that in the guides. As you can see, it makes a circular guide. And a circular guide is just as useful as a square or rectangular guide. The only difference is it's a circle. You can easily snap into the corners of the square and the rectangle. The circle has no corners, it has an arc in between its points, and that can also be useful. It just depends on what shape you need things to interact with and link up with that you don't want to also print. So making guides out of any shape can be useful. Some more useful things about guides. One, for instance, is when you're dragging out a guide, which this is going to be what you're going to do most of the time, is drag out a guide. I like to use the Make Guides option, Control S or Command S, or Control 5 or Command 5. I like to use that, but I find myself using this far more often. So when you're dragging out a guide, if you press Alt, I believe that's Option on the Mac, if you notice, it turns into a vertical guide. Holding in Alt does what it does for many other things. It alternates what you're doing, and an alternate horizontal line or a guide is a vertical line guide. So all I'm doing is holding an Alt when I'm dragging out my guide. Same thing, or if you were to drag it from the vertical and hold in Alt, it'll turn it into horizontal. Something else that's very useful. Frequently you're going to need to know exactly where you want your guides. If I want my guides 1/8 of an inch from the inside here, which would be right down, it would be 2 marks on the ruler. So if I want my guide 1/8 of an inch, it's hard to do that because they don't really snap to your ruler. So just hold in Shift, and at this point, if you notice, I'm holding in Alt to get the vertical guide because I dragged it from the top, and I'm holding in Shift to lock into the increments of the ruler. And no matter what you set your rulers to, the little increments that appear there, it'll lock into them. So if I wanted 1/8 of an inch, that's perfectly 1/8 of an inch from the origin of my document. So that about does it for my tutorial on guides and measuring in Adobe Illustrator. Stay tuned when we'll be going over the navigation and the different tools for navigating, as well as views and saving views, a little bit different than workspaces. So thank you for watching.